The term Black Irish has long carried a tone of pride, defiance, and suspicion. Some believed they were descendants of shipwrecked Spanish soldiers from the ill-fated Armada. Others said they were remnants of an ancient warrior tribe that survived every wave of conquest.
What if the story of Black Irish ancestry was never what we were told? For generations, whispers of shipwrecks, hidden lineages, and mysterious origins have shaped a narrative both romantic and vague.
With a handful of ancient skeletons dug from the windswept soil of Western Ireland. Among their finds were the bones of ordinary villagers, laid to rest under rough stone markers. The remains were logged, boxed, and quietly stored away in museum basements in Dublin and London.
But now, modern DNA analysis is tearing through myth and legend, uncovering truths far more complex and unsettling. Unexpected genetic links, erased histories, and shocking ancestral connections are forcing historians to rethink everything. So what exactly did the science uncover, and why are so many people calling these discoveries deeply disturbing worldwide? The hidden genetic story of Irish ancestry. In 2011, an important scientific investigation helped shed new light on a long-debated question about identity in Ireland. Researchers from the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland and the University of Edinburgh carried out a detailed DNA study focusing on the Irish traveling community. What they discovered challenged many assumptions. According to reports by the Irish Examiner, this was the first time the genetic makeup of Irish travelers had been examined so closely, and the results were striking. Rather than being a subgroup that emerged recently from social or economic separation, the study revealed that Irish travelers are actually a distinct ethnic minority. Their origins trace back much further than many had imagined. In fact, the genetic split between travelers and the settled Irish population appears to have occurred somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 years ago. This finding is especially significant because it predates the arrival of the Romani people in Europe by several centuries. In other words, Irish travelers are not descendants of Romani groups, as some had speculated, but instead represent a uniquely Irish lineage with deep historical roots. At the same time, other popular ideas about Irish ancestry have also been carefully examined and, in many cases, challenged. One such belief is the notion of a strong African connection behind certain Irish physical traits, particularly dark hair and darker complexions. However, modern genetic research does not support this claim. Instead, DNA evidence points in a different direction. Studies have shown that the closest genetic relatives of the Irish population in Europe are found not in Africa, but in northern Spain, specifically in the region known as the Basque Country. This discovery adds an interesting layer to long-standing stories about Irish origins. While some people have linked Irish ancestry to dramatic historical events like the Spanish Armada, the genetic evidence suggests a deeper and more ancient connection to the Iberian Peninsula. So, although the romantic idea of shipwrecked sailors shaping Irish identity may not hold up scientifically, there is still a genuine link between Ireland and Spain, just one rooted in prehistoric migration rather than legend. Even more fascinating insights come from recent studies of ancient human remains found in Ireland. By analyzing DNA extracted from bones dating back to the Stone Age, scientists have been able to trace the movements of early farming communities. These early settlers, it turns out, began their journey in regions often referred to as the Bible lands, an area broadly associated with the ancient Near East. Over time, they migrated westward into Europe, eventually reaching Ireland. They brought with them key elements of settled life, including domesticated animals, cultivated crops, and pottery-making skills. But they also carried genetic traits that would leave a lasting mark on the population. Among these were a tendency toward dark hair and brown eyes, features that are still seen in many Irish people today. This evidence leads to a surprising conclusion. Darker physical traits in Ireland may actually represent older, more deeply rooted ancestry. In contrast, Lighter hair and fairer complexions are believed to have arrived later, introduced by incoming groups such as the Vikings and other migrants who settled in Ireland during subsequent periods of invasion and interaction. So rather than being unusual or foreign, dark hair in Ireland may in fact be a sign of ancient heritage, linking modern individuals to some of the earliest inhabitants of the island. Science, through the careful study of DNA, continues to reshape our understanding of identity, ancestry, and history. What once seemed like simple or even mythical explanations are now being replaced with detailed, evidence-based narratives that reveal just how complex and interconnected human origins truly are. Who are the Irish? What is generally known about them? Are they really different? Let's find out. Thus, Ireland we think we know, and the one we don't. When many people imagine Ireland, a very specific picture forms almost instantly. Soft, pale skin dusted with freckles, bright red hair catching the light, and a quiet landscape wrapped in mist beneath a gray sky. It is a powerful image, one that has been repeated for generations through films, paintings, tourism ads, and old stories passed down over time. This version of Ireland feels familiar, almost unquestionable. But like many widely accepted images, it tells only part of a much deeper story. If you leave behind the busy cities and travel west, toward the edge of the island where the land meets the vast Atlantic Ocean, the atmosphere begins to change. The scenery grows more rugged, shaped by relentless winds and crashing waves. Cliffs rise sharply from the sea, and small villages sit quietly, as though untouched by time. In these remote places, something else becomes noticeable, something that quietly challenges the common picture people hold of the Irish. The people here do not always fit the expected look. Among the crowds, you begin to see darker features: thick, dark hair instead of red, skin with a warmer olive tone rather than pale, and eyes that seem deeper, almost carrying a quiet intensity. There is a presence about them that feels different, as though their appearance holds a story that stretches far beyond what is commonly known. It is subtle, but unmistakable. For generations, individuals with these features have been referred to as the Black Irish. The name itself sparks curiosity. It feels unusual, almost contradictory, especially in a place so strongly associated with lighter traits. Yet, despite how surprising it may sound, the term has existed in cultural conversations for a very long time, passed down through whispers, local stories, and shared identity. But the real question remains: who exactly are the Black Irish? Are they simply a natural variation within the Irish population, or is there something more to their story? Why do these darker features appear so distinctly in certain regions, particularly along the western coast? And perhaps most intriguing of all, why has their presence often been wrapped in mystery instead of clarity? Over time, many explanations have been offered. Some are rooted in folklore, others in historical guesses, and a few in more serious attempts to trace ancestry. Stories have linked them to shipwrecked sailors, ancient migrations, or forgotten encounters between distant peoples. Each explanation tries to fill the gap between expectation and reality, to make sense of something that does not easily fit into the simplified image of Ireland that most people know. Yet, the more you look into it, the more it becomes clear that easy answers are not enough. The story of these people is not something that can be fully understood through assumptions or surface-level ideas. It requires a willingness to question familiar narratives and to explore history beyond what is commonly repeated. Because Ireland, like every land shaped by time, carries layers of movement, of mixing, of change. Its people are not the result of a single story. but of many stories woven together across centuries. And within those layers lie truths that are often overlooked, simply because they do not match what we expect to see. So to truly understand the presence of the so-called Black Irish, we must be ready to go deeper. We must look beyond the postcards, beyond the stereotypes, and even beyond the myths that have grown over time. What we may discover is not just an explanation of physical features, but a far richer and more complex history, one that challenges what we think we know and invites us to see Ireland in an entirely new light. Because sometimes, the most fascinating truths are not the ones we are told first, but the ones waiting quietly beneath the surface, in plain sight. Are there any cultural stories and traditions that are indigenous of the Irish? Before the advancement of science, what has been known of the people? Let's delve into the details of the ancient traditions of the Irish. Stories we told before science could speak. Long before the rise of modern science, before laboratories and genetic testing could offer clear answers, people turned to stories to make sense of the world around them. Whenever something seemed unusual or difficult to explain, imagination stepped in to fill the gap. The idea of the Black Irish, Irish people with darker hair, eyes, or features, became one of those mysteries that invited storytelling. And over time, several fascinating explanations began to take shape. One of the most well-known and widely repeated tales is linked to the dramatic and almost legendary events surrounding the Spanish Armada. According to this story, when Spanish ships were wrecked along the rugged coasts of Ireland in the late 16th century, some of the sailors survived. These men, described as having darker Mediterranean features, are said to have settled among the Irish population. Over time, they supposedly married local women and passed on their distinct physical traits to future generations. It is a story that feels almost cinematic: shipwrecks, survival against the odds, and the blending of cultures through human connection. It carries a sense of romance and adventure that makes it easy to believe. However, when we look more closely at historical records, the reality appears far less dramatic. Most of the Spanish sailors who reached Irish shores were either captured by English forces, killed, or managed to return to Spain. There is very little solid evidence to suggest that large numbers of them stayed behind long enough to significantly influence the genetic makeup of the Irish people. As appealing as the story may be, it does not seem to hold up under careful examination. Another explanation reaches even further back in time, to the era of the Vikings. Historical accounts from that period sometimes refer to groups described as fair foreigners and dark foreigners. Over the years, some have interpreted these descriptions to mean that there were Vikings with darker features who may have contributed to the appearance of the so-called Black Irish. At first glance, this idea seems plausible. The Vikings traveled widely, interacted with many different cultures, and left their mark across Europe. However, modern historians and scholars offer a different interpretation of these old descriptions. Rather than referring to physical characteristics like hair or skin tone, the terms fair and dark were more likely used to distinguish between different groups or factions, possibly even rival Viking clans. In other words, these labels were probably about identity and allegiance, not appearance. Once again, a theory that sounds convincing begins to lose its strength when examined more carefully. Then came a much later period in Irish history, the 19th century, during the time of the Great Famine. This was a devastating era that forced many Irish people to leave their homeland in search of survival and opportunity elsewhere. As they spread across different parts of the world, the term Black Irish began to take on new meanings. In some cases, it was used to describe poorer Irish immigrants, those who faced hardship and struggle in foreign lands. In other situations, it referred to individuals who blended more easily into different societies, perhaps because of their darker features. At times, the term even carried subtle hints of prejudice or social distinction. Rather than being a clear description of ancestry, it became a flexible label shaped by social conditions, perceptions, and attitudes. So here we have three different explanations, each rooted in a different period of history. One tells of shipwrecked sailors and cultural blending. Another looks to ancient Viking encounters. The third reflects the social realities of migration and hardship. Each story attempts to explain a visible difference, to give meaning to something people noticed but did not fully understand. Yet, despite their appeal, none of these explanations truly gets to the heart of the mystery. They are, in many ways, reflections of human curiosity and creativity, rather than accurate accounts of reality. Because the real answer was never hidden in dramatic events or historical labels. It was not shaped by a single moment in time or a specific group of outsiders. Instead, the truth lies much deeper, within the complexity of human biology itself, quietly written into the genetic code that every person carries. What is the origin of the Irish? From where did the first breeds come? Let's dig into the details of how the first Irish came to being. A journey across ice and sea. To truly understand the story behind the so-called Black Irish, we must travel far beyond recorded history, back to a time when there were no kingdoms, no written language, and no clear sense of identity as we know it today. This journey begins over 10,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, when the world itself was undergoing a dramatic transformation. As the massive ice sheets slowly melted and began to withdraw, new lands emerged from beneath them, raw, untamed, and full of possibility. Ireland was one of these lands. It was not yet the green, settled island we imagine today, but a rugged, isolated place, shaped by cold winds and shifting climates. And yet, despite these harsh conditions, small groups of humans made a remarkable decision. They chose to go there. These early settlers were hunter-gatherers, resilient, resourceful people who lived closely with nature. At some point, they undertook a daring journey across icy and unpredictable waters. This was long before the age of advanced shipbuilding, which makes their migration even more extraordinary. Whether by simple boats, rafts, or other means, they crossed into Ireland with determination, stepping into a land that had never known human presence. Archaeological discoveries give us a glimpse into their lives. At sites like Mount Sandel, evidence of their existence still lingers. Flint tools, carefully shaped for hunting and cutting, have been found buried in the soil. There are traces of ancient fires, once used for warmth, cooking, and protection. Even small fragments of daily life, subtle signs of survival, tell us that these people did not merely visit Ireland, they made it their home. These were the island's first inhabitants, the pioneers of a human story that would unfold over thousands of years. But what makes their story even more fascinating is what modern science has revealed about who they were and where they came from. Genetic research has challenged many traditional assumptions. Rather than originating from the colder regions of Northern Europe, these early settlers appear to have deeper roots in the south. Their ancestry points toward ancient populations who once lived along the Atlantic coasts of what we now know as Spain and Portugal. During the height of the Ice Age, much of Europe was covered in ice and nearly uninhabitable. However, certain regions in the south remained relatively warmer and more stable. These areas acted as refuges, safe zones where human populations could survive through the harshest periods. Over time, as the climate improved and the ice began to recede, these groups started to move again. They followed the coastline northward, gradually expanding into newly available lands. Ireland, isolated yet inviting in its own way, became one of their destinations, and they did not arrive empty-handed. They carried with them not only their tools and survival skills, but also their physical traits and genetic heritage. Descriptions of these early people suggest features that might seem surprising when compared to common images of Ireland today. They likely had dark hair, deeper skin tones, and strong, adaptable bodies shaped by generations of survival in challenging environments. These traits were not random. They were the result of thousands of years of evolution and adaptation. What is truly remarkable is that traces of this ancient heritage may still be visible today. In certain parts of Western Ireland, some individuals exhibit darker features that stand out from the more commonly associated lighter complexions. While modern populations are the result of many waves of migration and mixing over centuries, these subtle echoes of the past remind us that history is never truly lost. The story of the Black Irish, therefore, is not a simple tale or a single origin. It is a deep and layered narrative that connects modern people to ancient journeys, survival against the odds, and the quiet movement of humans across a changing world. It challenges assumptions, sparks curiosity, and invites us to look beyond surface appearances. In the end, it is a powerful reminder. Long before borders and identities were defined, humanity was already moving, adapting, and leaving behind traces, some of which still live on today. How have the Irish people shaped their land over time? How have they evolved over the years? Let's dive into the details of the people who dominated Ireland. A land shaped by layers of people. Ireland's history is not a simple, single-threaded story that begins and ends with its earliest inhabitants. Instead, it is a long, unfolding journey shaped by many different people's movements, encounters, and transformations. Over thousands of years, new groups of people arrived on the island, and each one left behind traces of their presence in the genetic makeup of those who would come after them. What emerged was not a replacement of one people by another, but a gradual layering of identities. Roughly 6,000 years ago, a major turning point took place. Early farming communities made their way to Ireland from regions near the Near East. These people brought with them a completely different way of life. Unlike the hunter-gatherers, who had lived off the land by fishing, hunting, and gathering wild plants, these newcomers introduced agriculture. They cultivated crops, raised animals, and built more permanent settlements. Life began to change in structure and rhythm. But these farmers did not arrive in an empty land. They encountered communities that had already adapted to Ireland's environment over generations. Rather than one group completely displacing the other, their lives became intertwined. Over time, they intermarried, shared knowledge, and blended cultures. This interaction was not just cultural, it became biological. Their DNA mixed, forming a new and more complex population. Centuries later, during the Bronze Age, another wave of change swept across Ireland. New groups arrived from far-reaching areas across Eurasia. These people were part of larger movements that had already influenced much of Europe. They carried with them new technologies, including advanced metalworking skills, as well as fresh cultural ideas, and possibly even early forms of Indo-European languages. One of the most fascinating pieces of evidence from this period comes from Rathlin Island, located off the northern coast of Ireland. Archaeological discoveries there uncovered the remains of individuals whose genetic signatures pointed to connections with steppe populations, groups who once roamed vast grasslands stretching across Eurasia. These steppe-linked people played a significant role in shaping the genetic and cultural landscape of Europe, and their presence in Ireland adds another layer to the island's deep and complex story. Ireland's uniqueness lies not in migration alone, but in what followed. Unlike many regions where new groups replace older ones, Ireland preserved its earliest genetic layers. These ancient lineages did not disappear. Instead, they endured quietly, coexisting with later arrivals and shaping a population where past and present remain deeply intertwined. This continuity is especially noticeable in the western parts of Ireland, in regions such as County Kerry and Connaught. These areas, shaped by rugged landscapes, mountains, and distance from major migration routes, acted almost like natural shelters. Because they were more isolated, they experienced fewer external influences compared to other regions. As a result, ancient genetic traits remained unusually strong in these places. It is almost as though time moved more slowly there, allowing older characteristics to survive while the rest of the world changed more rapidly. These regions became living windows into the past, preserving echoes of Ireland's earliest people. In the end, Ireland did not become a land defined by a single origin or identity. Instead, it became something far richer, a living blend of histories. Its people carry within them the legacy of hunter-gatherers, early farmers, and Bronze Age migrants alike. These influences, coming from both southern and northern regions, merged over time into one shared identity. Rather than being erased or replaced, each layer remained, contributing to a deep and enduring human story, one that continues to live on in the people of Ireland today. How have the Irish people evolved over the centuries? How were they able to survive against time, disaster, and change? Let's find out. Survival against time, disaster, and change. Ireland's genetic story is far more than a record of where its people came from. It is a story of resilience, survival, and quiet endurance through centuries of hardship. The island, small yet stubbornly enduring, has seen waves of challenges that would have altered its very essence, and yet, in many ways, it has remained remarkably unchanged at its core. Ireland's history is marked by devastating upheavals that reshaped its people and identity. The Black Death wiped out entire communities, while invasions by Vikings and Normans altered its culture and population. Later, the Great Famine forced millions into a harsh choice between death and emigration. As families fled across oceans, they carried their heritage with them, scattering Irish traditions worldwide and leaving a lasting imprint of survival, loss, and resilience. And yet, through all this turmoil, Ireland's genetic backbone endured. Scientists now know that despite mass deaths, invasions, and emigration, much of Ireland's core DNA remained surprisingly intact. This is especially true in rural villages and coastal regions, where the island's geography provided a natural shield. Mountains loomed as barriers, bogs swallowed expanses of land, and long distances between settlements made it difficult for disease and invaders to reach every corner. These natural defenses acted like a filter, slowing the spread of foreign genes and allowing local populations to survive and reproduce with minimal disruption. This isolation, however, was not total. Ireland's people moved, traded, and sometimes fought. Yet, even with these interactions, the ancient patterns of ancestry endured. Men carrying distinct Y chromosome lineages in particular show remarkable continuity across centuries. High concentrations of these lineages in certain areas suggest that some families and clans remained rooted in the same lands for hundreds, even thousands of years, passing down their genetic legacy from one generation to the next. Emigration did not erase Ireland's genetic identity. It exported it. Across North America, Australia, and beyond, Irish emigrants carried with them the same ancient DNA, planting seeds of their heritage in new soil. In this way, Ireland's genes spread worldwide, while the heart of the island retained its unique patterns. Irish ancestry, it seems, is simultaneously local and global, a testament to the resilience of its people. Modern genetic research has confirmed what folklore and history long hinted at. Ireland contains some of the oldest and most distinct DNA patterns in Western Europe. These patterns are more than markers on a map. They are living echoes of the past, threads connecting the present population to ancestors who survived plagues, wars, and famines. They tell a story not only of survival, but of continuity, of a culture and people who weathered storms yet managed to retain their core identity. In simple terms, Ireland's genetic history is not just about who the Irish are or where they came from. It is about endurance, about survival against overwhelming odds. It is about an island that endured centuries of devastation, and yet, through mountains, bogs, and distances that both challenged and protected its people, it preserved the very essence of its identity. Ireland did not merely survive history, it carried it forward, woven into the DNA of generations, a living monument to resilience that spans both time and geography. Where does Black Irish come in? What does the expression represent? Let's delve into the details of who the Black Irish are and why they're so called. The truth about the Black Irish. Black Irish isn't a scientific label or single ancestry, nor tied to one dramatic event. Instead, it reflects a complex, ancient, and subtle heritage rooted in deep, layered human history. The term Black Irish hints at something that goes back to the very earliest chapters of human life on the island of Ireland. The dark hair, the deep eye colors, and the olive or sun-kissed skin that often come to mind with this phrase are not accidental. They are echoes of people who lived thousands of years ago. Ice Age survivors who journeyed along the Atlantic coast, adapting to new lands and new climates. They were the first brave seafarers, the ones who set out across open water into the unknown, carrying nothing but their courage and their hopes for survival. In this sense, the Black Irish are not an anomaly in Ireland's story. They are a deeper, more ancient layer of it. Their features are not exceptions to Irish identity. Rather, they are a reminder that Irishness itself has always been complex, layered, and ever-changing. The Black Irish connect the present to a time long before modern nations, borders, and labels existed. They remind us of an era when Irish, Spanish, or European were meaningless terms, when human identity was shaped by movement, adaptation, and the quiet persistence of family lines across centuries. Every dark curl of hair, every deep-set eye, every shade of skin carries whispers of this history. It tells of a people who endured storms, migration, famine, season, and the slow passage of time, who adapted to whatever the land and sea demanded, and who carried forward a fragile yet unbreakable sense of identity. That identity wasn't defined by a single event or a neat category. It was defined by resilience. It was defined by survival. Perhaps the most remarkable part of the Black Irish story is that it's not really about being different. It's about endurance. It's about continuity. It's about how the past doesn't truly vanish. It doesn't disappear into textbooks or folklore. Instead, it lives quietly in the present, in ways we often take for granted. It exists in our DNA, in the subtle shapes of our faces, in the inheritance of traits that stretch back through countless generations. Every glance in the mirror can be a glimpse into that long, intricate history, a history of movement, struggle, adaptation, and life persisting against odds that would have crushed lesser spirits. To call someone Black Irish is to acknowledge that story, even if we can't always fully see it. It is to recognize that beneath every feature lies a lineage of endurance, a quiet testament to human survival and the mysterious paths our ancestors walked. It is a phrase that doesn't just describe appearance. It tells of journeys across ice, sea, and time. It carries the memory of people who dared to venture into the unknown, who planted their roots in a rugged land, and who left behind a legacy that flows through generations. In the end, the story of the Black Irish is a story of time itself, of how the echoes of the past persist, sometimes hidden, sometimes unmistakable, but always present. It is a story written not in ink or stone, but in flesh, in blood, and in the enduring rhythm of life passed down from those who came before. The Black Irish are a living reminder that the past never truly leaves us. It lives on, quietly, in every face, in every feature, and in the invisible script of our DNA. So, what do you think about the Black Irish? Do you agree with what the DNA revealed about them? We'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.